God has placed signs in the hands of all men, that every man may know his work. That's Job 37, verse 7, from St. Hiram's translation.
Getting philosophical right out of the gate, aren't we?
Well, that quote actually kicks off one of our sources today. Chiromancy and Astrology, a complete guide, really sets the mood, I think. Because today we're diving into these, well, ancient beliefs around chiromancy, palm reading, and astrology.
Right, looking at how people, historically tried to figure themselves out, their futures maybe, by looking up at the stars and down at their hands.
Exactly, and we're using that guide plus some bits from the influence of the stars.
Yeah. So for everyone listening, if you're curious about these older ways of thinking, we're going to pull out the really interesting stuff, the key ideas.
Without getting too bogged down, hopefully. Just the surprising bits, the core concepts.
A clear look at these, old worldviews.
Okay, so let's start with astrology. It's kind of wild to think how much sway it held.
Oh, absolutely. The influence of the stars mentions it started way back in the East.
And it was huge, wasn't it? Up until, what, the mid-1600s?
Yeah, it wasn't just like a fringe thing. It affected daily life, royal decisions, everything.
And it's funny how these old world beliefs, as the text calls them, seem to be having a bit of a comeback now.
Definitely seeing renewed interest. The core idea, though, from these texts
is that the planets, the sun, moon, stars, they influence things down here.
Pretty much everything, yeah. Living things, non-living things, that was the belief.
And the moment of birth was absolutely crucial.
The exact moment. They thought that snapshot of the heavens determined, your mind, your body.
Your whole future path, basically.
Right, and they were serious about it. It wasn't just guesswork.
No, both sources stress that. Astrology demanded serious study.
Years of it. Memory, attention to detail, logical deduction.
And they even argued that if predictions failed, it wasn't the science, it was the practitioner.
Exactly. Blame the astrologer, not the stars. An interesting take.
The influence of the stars also gives a bit of history, tracing it back to Egypt, like 1,000 years BCE.
And then it spread out. And Claudius Ptolemy is a big name here.
Right, his Tetrabiblos. Super influential work.
Definitely. And a key thing to remember is their focus on the 7 ancient planets.
Jupiter, Saturn, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the Moon.
Yeah, even though we know about more planets now, these texts say, for this kind of mystical study, you stick to those 7.
It's interesting they mentioned shepherds as early astrologers.
Well, it makes sense, right? Out all night under the stars.
Just observing, that close connection to nature must have fostered some kind of intuitive grasp.
For sure. And they connected those big cycles to individuals. Each planet was in the ascendant, rising in the east, once a day.
And the specific mix of planets up there when you were born. That was supposed to shape your looks, your personality.
And your fate. Your whole destiny, supposedly.
The zodiac signs mattered too, of course, influencing body and mind.
But always secondary to the planets. The planets were the main drivers.
They also talked about aspects, didn't they? The angles between planets.
Right, like try 120 degrees apart, that was generally good.
And opposition 180 degrees, that was bad. Or evil, as they put it.
And they stuck to these traditional ones, even when later astronomers like Kepler found other angles they thought were important.
Now, here's something I found interesting. Ptolemy knew the constellations shift over time, right?
Yeah, precession.
But he argued the zodiac's influence wasn't tied to the actual star patterns.
But to the space they occupied, like 12 slices of the sky.
Right. The power was in the divisions, the ambient space, not the pictures.
Exactly. And our source says that's why Ptolemy's system can still kind of be mapped onto modern astronomy, in a way. It's about the spatial relationships.
Fascinating. Okay, so that's a glimpse into the astrological worldview. Shall we shift to the hands now? Chiromancy.
Let's do it. Palmistry. The texts draw direct lines, pardon the pun, between those planets we just talked about and parts of the hand.
Specifically the mounts, those fleshy pads at the base of the fingers.
Yep. Let's start with the mount of Saturn. That's under the second finger, the middle finger.
Saturn, the planet of fatality, as the text calls it. Sounds ominous.
It could be that mount was seen as very extreme, either really bad luck or really good fortune, depending on how it looked.
And markings mattered too.
Oh, yeah. It also suggested a tendency towards occult studies, which fits Saturn.
So if it was well developed.
That was good. Prudence, wisdom, success.
But if it was too big, excessive.
Then you might see sadness, being withdrawn, maybe morbid thoughts, even asceticism or dread. Potential for suicide was mentioned in extreme cases.
Wow. And if it was just flat,
It's
Absent?
just an insignificant life, apparently. Nothing much happening.
Even the shape of the finger mattered. The Saturn finger itself.
Yeah, pointed could mean callousness, especially if Mercury's mount was strong, too.
Mercury being the little finger's mount.
Right. Square tip on the Saturn finger meant prudence, good with agriculture, maybe mechanical skill.
And spatulae, like wider at the tip.
That linked to sadness, superstition. And if that finger was really long and the thumb seemed weak, that was another potential warning sign for suicide risk. Heavy stuff.
Definitely heavy.
Hmm?
Okay, moving over one finger, the mount of the sun. Beneath the third finger.
Associated with the sun, obviously. Generally much more positive.
So a well-developed mount of the sun indicated.
A love of arts and literature. Poetry, painting, music, you name it. Also suggested tolerance in religion, grace, possibly riches and fame.
This is pretty good. Is there a downside?
Well, if it was excessive, too pronounced, it could mean loving flashiness, being frivolous, maybe boastful,
Yeah.
a bit superficial.
And if it was absent, like the Saturn mount.
Then you get a purely material existence. No real taste for art or beauty. A life lacking inspiration, perhaps.
And the finger shapes again. For the sun finger.
The same idea. Pointed meant idealism, artistic tastes.
Square.
More realism in art, but also a love of wealth. Practical application, maybe.
That's specialite.
Adventure, maybe gambling or speculation, especially if that third finger was longer than the first, the index finger.
Okay, beyond the general mounts, the sources get into very specific markings, right? Some sound quite dramatic.
They really do. Like the sign of Aquarius showing up on the mount of the moon.
The mount of the moon is on the heel of the hand, opposite the thumb.
That's the one. If Aquarius appeared there, even just on one hand, it was seen as a strong sign of death by drowning.
Very specific.
Yeah.
And a circle on the heart line.
Yeah, specifically under the little finger, Mercury's finger. That meant you might unintentionally cause the death of someone close to you.
Oof, that's
Yeah.
intense. What about the mount of Venus, the base of the thumb?
A star low down on that mount signified dishonor through sensuality or unnatural vice, as the text puts it.
They didn't mince words.
Not at all. And lines could combine with stars, too. A line from the wrist, crossing Venus, ending in a star on the palm.
Let me guess, something bad.
Tragic loss of a dear friend.
Okay, so stars seem pretty significant, especially on the mounts, often indicating fate beyond your control.
That's the general idea. But the meaning varied by mount. Jupiter star meant honors, good marriage, unexpected glory.
Sounds good. Saturn star.
Not so good.
Okay.
Assassination, execution, or maybe paralysis if the rest of the hand looked positive.
A real contrast. Sun star.
Depends on the sun line. If that line was weak or missing, a star meant riches but unhappy love life.
But if the sun line was strong,
Then it could mean artistic success or even military glory if the mount of Mars was also strong.
Mars being on the side below Mercury.
Yeah, we're the plane of Mars in the center. A star on the mount of Mars meant death in battle. On the plane, military honor,
Mercury star.
theft and dishonor, public disgrace.
And the moon star, drowning again.
If it was on a voyage line, yes. If not, maybe illness related to water, like dropsy or diabetes.
A star right in the middle of the palm.
Unhappy influence from the opposite sex.
And a star on Venus itself.
Unhappiness caused by love troubles. Seems Venus stars were often linked to relationship woes.
And the lines coming from these stars added another layer.
Exactly. Like a line from a star on Venus that forked over on the mount of Saturn. Unhappy marriage.
But a straight line from that Venus star going to the mount of the sun.
That was quite specific. A large inheritance coming from the death of a close relative.
Wow. It's quite a complex web they wove. You start to see how astrology and chiromancy could interact, couldn't you?
Absolutely. Imagine finding, say, a strong Saturn influence in someone's birth chart.
And then seeing a really prominent mount of Saturn on their hand. It would seem to confirm things.
Well, maybe contradict them, adding another layer of interpretation. It wasn't simple A plus B, C stuff.
So, definitely required piecing together lots of different clues from the heavens and the hand.
A whole system of interpretation.
So, wrapping this up, we've taken a journey today into these, well, really fascinating historical worlds of astrology and chiromancy.
Yeah, looking at how ancient people used the planets, the zodiac, the lines on the hand, all to try and understand life and destiny.
You've gotten a sense of what those features meant within those traditions. The planets, the mounts, the stars.
And it makes you think, doesn't it? These ancient efforts to find patterns, find meaning, both out there in the cosmos and right here in ourselves.
How does that resonate today? We still want self-understanding. We still look for patterns. even if our tools are different.
Exactly. What can we maybe learn from just looking at how they tried to understand things, even if we don't buy into the specifics anymore? It's an intriguing thought.
Definitely something to ponder. And if you found this deep dive interesting,
Click like and subscribe to the Unlock Your Mind channel.